can work with the mind and really own the willpower that you have to bring to a cleanse or a fast.
I'm Heather Grish, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrish.com or on Instagram at heathergrish. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today, I'm here with Teresa Piro, a pioneer in the raw juice and seasonal cleanse industry in the San Francisco Bay Area, who's been in the health and wellness industry for over 10 years as the owner and operator of Can Cleanse. Teresa is an advocate for eating and drinking whole foods and practicing mindfulness. With a background in holistic health and her extensive line of plant-based beverages, including cold-pressed fruit and vegetable juices, nut milks, and herbal teas and savory soups, Teresa develops unique and inspiring cleanse programs for her clients. You know, Teresa is actually one of my closest friends. She is a bright light of positivity and motivation for so many people. She does amazing things with food and is one of the most loving and caring people I know. So I'm ridiculously excited to have her here with us today. So thank you so much for joining us, Teresa.
Thank you, Heather.
Oh my God. Okay. So anybody who knows me a little bit knows that I love fasting, and I'm so excited to chat with you today about this and pump up some of the listeners to get curious about experimenting with different forms of fasting. And not all the listeners, of course, because some of us really don't benefit from fasting, but a lot of us can, right?
Right.
I didn't even plan that. It just happened. So Teresa, first tell the audience about your story. What made you start a juice fasting company? I remember you telling me how you started at home in your kitchen, but how did all this come about?
Sure. Thanks again, Heather, for inviting me to the show today. So this was back in 2010, and I had been involved in kind of the food and hospitality business, connected with a local farm that sourced great organic produce from Sonoma County. And I was meeting a lot of people that really were interested in juice cleanses. And at the time, really the only place to get these juice cleanses was from New York City. So they were paying an arm and a leg for overnight shipping of cold pressed juices to their door in the Bay Area. And right then and there, I thought that was wild, knowing what I know about the country's organic produce supply. Like about 80% of the nation's organic produce is grown in California. So the fact that this juice company in New York City was shipping whole organic produce to New York, juicing it there, bottling it, and shipping it back to California just kind of blew my mind. And I thought, there had to be a more local approach to this. And obviously there was people who were exploring cleansing and fasting, and this is back in 2010, and there really weren't a lot of options in San Francisco. And at the time, I was also going to school for holistic nutrition, really just for personal enrichment. It's an area and field I enjoy learning about, mostly for my own benefit and for family members, but also realized that there was an opportunity to combine my passion for food and organic produce and helping others. And I started making potions, as my roommates called it, out of my kitchen. I lived with 3 roommates at the time, and I was just kind of playing around, and I had a friend ask me to make them a cleanse. And I thought, well, sure, I can do this. And so I started juicing and wanted to do it a little bit differently, because I found that when people do a juice cleanse and have just cooling beverages, that their bodies don't necessarily respond that well to all cooling beverages. And in fact, some people, their body makeup and their qi, as they call it in Chinese medicine, does not respond to cool green juices. And so while green juices were becoming all the rage, I wanted to add warming components. So Can Cleanse actually is about 50% cold pressed juices and then 50% other beverages. Everything's plant-based, but I made herbal teas, savory plant-based soups that were pureed, so easy to digest, but still contain some fiber, as well as a nut milk, because I felt that people needed to be satiated a little bit more than just on liquid juices, because most clients were wanting to still go about their days and have to, go to work and show up for family and things like that. So they needed a little bit extra. And after that, my friend took it to work, and the next day I had 3-4 other people asking me to make them cleanses.
That's amazing. So had you been doing a lot of juice fasting yourself or any kinds of cleanses at the time that you were exploring all this? Had you experienced it?
On the same scale as the can format, so short cleanses, a day to 3 days max. I had worked with friends and clients during my holistic nutrition program, kind of doing little case studies. And mostly, a lot of clients had goals of losing weight, and we would play a little bit with fasting, some intermittent fasting or juice fasting with the soups, and we're seeing positive results and just really reinvigorating people about how they could change their diet and eating patterns, but also like their mental capacity and mental focus to make longer term changes in their diet. And that was the fascinating part to me. Like when I fasted or would do these short juice cleanses, my energy was up, my mental clarity was up, and you just felt really inspired to keep that feeling going, which would mean some changes in your eating habits. So that was really also the piece that I really wanted to share with people, is having felt that and seen others benefit from it. This focused time of just pause and reset from routine eating had a really powerful impact outside of just the physical.
Right. Because when we stop eating what we're eating normally and we try something different, and maybe even if we try something less, then we can start to experience a reset of our bodies. So you mentioned weight loss, and I know a lot of people fast for weight loss, but are there other reasons that people are doing your juice fasts?
Yeah, surprisingly, I would say a majority of my clients are healthy individuals who are looking for maintenance and also just very proactive about preventative health measures and what they can do to look at as they age and longevity, and also just quality of life and how they feel and they operate. So a lot of them come because they're really tuned into their body and they know when they're off, whether they just feel like extra bloated, maybe they feel fatigued, or that just kind of that brain fog is happening, and they tune in and they know that they can do a short fast and really reset. And so that has been a really big population of our clients, are those that are using it as a maintenance tool.
Is fasting, or even sort of the idea of having juices, is that something that was done in your family growing up? Was that ever part of your family lineage?
No, not at all. I wish. I wish. I mean, I think I lived through as a child of the 80s, like the margarine and the low fat, no fat diet. And that didn't work. That still doesn't work for people. And if anything, I think focus on whole foods and plant-based diet is really beneficial and could have been more beneficial in my upbringing as well.
And then what got you interested in nutrition in the first place?
I guess to the same point about my family and upbringing, I was diagnosed with high cholesterol levels at a very young age. It probably was 11 or 12 when I first had blood work done and indicated high levels, which is crazy because I was relatively active. I've always been very lean. You'd look at me and think, no way. But genetically, on my mom's side of the family, just there was a hereditary lineage of high cholesterol. So that right away, I sat down with a nutritionist with my mom, and we discussed nutrition and what that meant, and good and bad foods, which again, at this time, it was all about low fat, cutting out fat, no to saturated fats, and watching sugar intake. And as a preteen, you kind of take that maybe to the extreme. And so I started to be like uber healthy in my eating. And, some people thought eat like a bird. I'd pack spinach leaves and carrot sticks and just very low fat foods. And it didn't make a difference with my cholesterol levels. So in fact, like they just continued to go up. And I think that's what eventually led me to wanting to go to school for holistic health, for personal enrichment, was trying to figure out what was going on and what we'd been taught about eating certain foods that were low in fat. Did that really work? It didn't seem to be working for me. And the holistic nutrition background that I have is very much about whole foods, meaning you are getting fats, you're getting plant-based, or it could be lean animal proteins too, but that have not been modified or engineered or anything, but actually having whole fats in your diet are very beneficial for a lot of the systems in our bodies.
All right. So, Teresa, tell the audience a little bit about what happens when we do a fast, maybe any kind of fast.
So, first of all, going into the fast, there seems to be a lot of apprehension or maybe some anxiety going into it. And especially, I guess, for first timers here. So, when you embark on a cleanse for the first time, you really don't know what to expect. And honestly, I can't tell you what to expect because everybody responds very differently to a fast. I'm speaking a little bit to kind of restricted calorie fast. So not necessarily like a water fast, but in my experience, using the plant-based beverages. And so when you go into it, first of all, I give some guidelines. I want people to kind of start to mentally and physically prepare by weaning off of certain foods, any sort of vices, if it's white flours or sugars, alcohol, caffeine. I try to prepare you because then when you dive into, for the Can program, typically a 3-day fast, you're getting about, less than maybe about a third of the calories that you would get in a normal day. And so the body tends to kind of freak out or kind of is in shock, if you will, because it's expecting that routine eating that you do 3 times a day. Maybe it's 5 times if you have a few snacks in there. It's anticipating that there's food coming in. And so the juices then will kind of satiate those cravings, but the body starts to experience this format that's unusual. So a lot of times the first day is a real struggle for people. They could be cranky, they're hungry. If they weren't really diligent about a pre-cleanse and they drink caffeine, you might have some withdrawal symptoms like a headache or other side effects that are totally normal, muscle cramps, things like that. But people are just really kind of put out of their comfort zone. And honestly, I like that about the cleanse and the fasting is that it gets you in your head and it realizes how much we are all creatures of habits. We eat the same foods, or like you said, we eat at the same time every day. And when you're on a fast, it kind of just throws everything out the window and it's left you to kind of in this like survival mode. And that's where the mental comes in. And that's where I usually pop in and remind people, this is very much mental. In fact, probably 99% of fasting is mental, and it's practicing willpower, self-restraint, knowing that this isn't forever, but it's truly like a practice of willpower, really. And so I try to switch people who are maybe struggling at that point into their head and be like, okay, you got this, you can do this, and it's not forever. And then by, the first night, usually people get really good sleep when they're fasting. And that's attributed to the fact that the digestive system isn't on overdrive. The digestive system actually welcomes this break. Our bodies are in tune and know exactly what they need to do in order to detox on a regular basis. And that's one of the best things about the human body. Like it knows what to do, but rarely do we give it a chance to do what it knows how to do. So the body's happy. I mean, it's not having to work to break down your food, sort out carbohydrates from fats and proteins that are all mixed in your stomach when you have a sandwich. So it really starts to kind of flush out as it's supposed to. So by day 2, you often hit the stride of feeling like, wow, I actually am starting to feel good. Like, wow, I don't really need to eat all the time. The beverages and a liquid fast support you through that. So there's some easily to digest juices or the soups that are easy to digest, satiate you just enough. And then you start to make this turn where you start to realize, wow, I'm feeling lighter. I'm feeling brighter. I don't have any bloating or gas or whatever your ailments might be too. That stuff seems to just like go away. And then you have by day 3, you have worked through all those transitions of the body coming to terms that it's not getting these regular meals, and you feel this lightness about you. And so that's the part where I feel like with fasting brings this mental clarity by the end. Of course, the body too physically gets to release. So the body usually sheds some water and sodium weight. So you just feel lighter and brighter by the end. And I think that's what is so powerful about fasting is that you get this focused time for both a physical and mental reset.
So, wow. Yeah. It's so fun listening to you describe that. And I'm like, gosh, I really need to do a fast again. I'm a big intermittent faster. And I find that since I've had a child, it's much harder to do it. I don't know if you found that as well, that it's harder to fast with kids around.
Oh, for sure. If I get my 12 hours or 16 hours overnight, like I feel very good about myself.
Totally. So it's interesting because, you mentioned that this isn't water fasting, and obviously water fasting kind of takes these things up another level, and that this is really quite a nice, gentle way of doing a fast. And you mentioned that people get really good sleep, but do people ever go overboard with it, in your opinion, that you've seen and have some side effects?
There's the general side effects that they get during, like I said, things like headaches, sometimes muscle cramps or soreness. Some people feel a little bit foggy or obviously angry from being hungry, things like that. But I don't really let the clients go further than they should or could. The practice of canning really is meant to be short and seasonal. And so it's almost like just this practice I encourage every 3 months for that check in. Although I have worked with clients who are on a weight loss journey and want to go much longer. And that is exciting and exhilarating for me and exciting and scary for them. But I've had some great results where they actually do drop a lot of weight, but it's a very controlled practice with me involved. And that's where I think that, there's anticipated side effects, but nothing so extreme. That I've had very few clients, let's say in over 10 years, that have aborted mission like halfway through. Very few, because we really try to meet their needs with the 8 different beverages a day and the soup and the almond milk as kind of crutches to get them through.
Yeah. And I've had a lot of your juices. For the audience, Teresa is known for always carrying a bag of glass cans around with her, these with the cutest little labels on them. And so I've had a lot of your juices. And it's interesting because depending on where a person's at with their regular diet, their routine, the way that they eat. And I know that you're a big proponent of organic and whole foods. But the extreme, I guess it could feel like more of a shift for someone who has a really, really different diet than that, who maybe like isn't plant-based and maybe is eating, I don't know, do you ever get people who eat fast food who are trying this?
I do. I wish I got to work with more of them, but I have. And it's rough. Day one is really rough for them. They also usually have the best outcome, meaning they're able, because of their maybe poor diet and eating choices, they have a lot more inflammation that could show up in the form of, feeling bloated. And so they're retaining a lot more water and sodium weight, which is really quick to fall off when you're doing a fast. And so they usually are really reinvigorated and inspired because that kind of inflammation is able to release during the process. And that's hopeful and inspiring for them and for myself.
I know you've worked with a lot of clients because you've been doing this for 10 years, and your clients come back and back and back and back and back, and you have really long relationships with them. Is there a story that comes to mind of a client who went through a really big health transformation that you've seen from doing this?
Yeah, we have a very, very loyal client base, which is so touching. And I'm so happy that we could be a part of their lives for so long. Like I said, a lot of them are relatively healthy and they use this as maintenance. A few in particular have I'll pick 2. So one client in particular has been battling autoimmune disorder and Lyme disease. And we have been able to, over, it's been probably at least 2 years of working together, been able to transform her health, in addition to the village of other wellness experts that she works with, but doing weekly juicing and plant-based products that we offer. So the juices with the teas and some soups, and to really fine tune and check in on a weekly basis in order to just find more comfort in her day to day and really keep the symptoms at bay, which is phenomenal. And, she'll see, like, when she goes off the weekly juices, and she's eating in addition to these juices. So it's not just a fast or a cleanse, but supplementing her diet with our juices. And the benefits are pretty much off the charts about how she feels, her energy levels. The other type of clients, there's been a handful who are going through radiation or chemo, and they come to us because they have problems with keeping food down or having any sort of appetite. And they find that the almond milks have been really satiating and also offer the calories that they need when they're trying not to lose weight and to keep their immune system and their physical strength up. So we've been able to look at customized programs where we include more of the caloric drinks, which are the almond milks and the soups that also contain fiber, really help like lift them up during these really trying times of their lives. And they're like our biggest fans because they often nothing else feels good and they're able to consume our products. And then after, they keep it going because they've seen the transformation too and in their energy levels and also, skin and sleep and things like that.
If you want to create a more receptive body free from toxins, inflammation, and metabolic issues, would it be crazy for you to explore booking an Ayurvedic consultation with me? There's probably never been a more perfect time to do it. Every day you wait matters when it comes to your health. So if you're ready to get your body back in balance, I'll give you a 30-day plan to get you started. Go to heathergrish.com to book a consultation. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. Yeah, because I've had a lot of your stuff and it's absolutely delicious.
Thank you.
I mean, I've had, a lot of them and I love your chia puddings.
Oh, me too.
Are you doing those all year round?
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah.
The kids love them too.
Yes, they're amazing. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
So let's talk about willpower and self-control. I agree. And in fact, even what you're saying about, the willpower thing, it's even written about, in the Ayurvedic text, 600 BC, right? And it's interesting because a lot of the religions, fascinating, a lot of the religions also build in some form of fasting. And that's really interesting. And there are a lot of people who don't have religion these days because there's just been a general decline in the United States, at least, of all the major religions that have been traditionally practiced here. So this idea of having other ways to sort of practice torturing ourselves and being able to tolerate it. No, I say that sort of kidding, but
right.
Fasting in Ayurveda comes under the category of treatments that are not comfortable or not nourishing. And so it's interesting that, at least, from a healing perspective, oftentimes we think that in order to heal, we need something that is loving, cozy, things like that. But it is interesting that sometimes we need these things that are very, very, very uncomfortable in order to heal something. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think I was listening to one of your previous episodes and you were talking about fasting as medicine. And I think that really resonated with me because a lot of times, to your point, this is an age-old practice and fasting's been around forever, but it's how we check in with ourselves in our time of need. And oftentimes, in order to create that change, you have to do something uncomfortable. You have to change the script. You have to go the other direction. And I feel like this focus time of you're completely abandoning your normal eating routine and going to these liquid in jars for 3 days, it's asking a lot of people. And oftentimes the clients are still doing their day to day, like they're going to work, they have to operate as usual, but they're doing it on so much less. And that can be a painful experience. But that's where this mentality and really what everything behind my brand of Can is this idea that you can do it and it should be a positive thing if you can work with the mind and really own the willpower that you have to bring to a cleanse or a fast. Like we can prepare these delicious plant-based beverages for you and we can deliver it to your door, but you really have to show up for yourself and you really have to want it and you can absolutely do it. And so that's where kind of the you can do it can comes from, is this idea that let's do this, like let's be positive about it. Yes, there's highs and lows every day of the cleanse process. And every time you cleanse, it's going to feel different, but you're also targeting different goals each time. that to me is, again, this exercise of cleansing or fasting really, really exercises willpower that some people didn't even realize they had. And so that's what they overcome during the process. And the outcome is just phenomenal. People feel so good about themselves. And that's my favorite part of my work, is that the outcome is just this newfound appreciation for themselves and what they can do.
I totally forgot about earlier when you were talking about the cholesterol when you were young. I totally forgot about that. How was that discovered? Were you sick and then they ran some blood work? Because we're not really checking cholesterol on kids that age very often.
I think it was just a basic like lipid panel. It was probably the first one I'd ever had. And the triglycerides were elevated, and so was the bad cholesterol. And the good was in an okay range, but it was just kind of alarming at that age to see that. And then not much was talked about the benefits of good fats or what good fat from bad fat was. It was all just lumped into fat is bad. And I think that is where we really went wrong in this whole standard American diet, which ironically is SAD for SAD, the standard American diet, has really, really, really let people down.
And it totally makes sense that this would then sort of become your life's work after that as well.
Yeah, you start to question things. And I think that's kind of what's wrong. People don't necessarily question or advocate for their own health, but you have to take it into your own hands and start to figure out, like, the body is it's a puzzle in that respect, figuring out what works for you versus what works for me. And I know you know that in your work, like in Ayurveda, like it's sitting down and pulling back the layers and being willing to make some changes and maybe find the place for Western medicine, but also find the place for Eastern medicine and come together and to make things really harmonious for the body and your health.
I want to talk about toxins because I know that, when we do a cleanse, this is often something that people want to get rid of toxins. Like it's a big part of the psychology too, when somebody wants to do a cleanse. Is that something that you've seen with your clients too?
Yeah, I think for sure they don't necessarily know what they're trying to eliminate or detox from. Detox, I think, is thrown around so liberally these days, like the word to detox, and that, is associated directly with juice cleansing and I'm going to detox my body. And that is what I mentioned earlier, like our bodies are designed to detox. We have all the right systems in place, the liver, the kidneys, even the skin. So those systems are in place, but it's really hard for the body to get to work when there's all these other environmental toxins. I mean, that could be from the skincare products we use, the air we breathe, to the water we drink, and of course the processed foods that we eat. So that's where toxins are coming from. And I don't know that people are making that correlation, right? That just everyday living every day is filled with toxins. And if they just keep layering and layering on, and you don't take this time to pause and check in with your body on a regular basis. That's why I'm such a fan of the intermittent fasting. You can detox your body every day if you stop eating, at 7, 8 o'clock at night and then don't resume until at least 8 or 10 the next day. It has a really big impact on your body being able to get to work on what it's born to do.
Yeah, totally. And then also the other thing I hear when people think of toxins is drinking. Do people do this to sort of take a break from drinking that you've seen?
They do. And they also do it in advance of a big binge weekend. And those clients, like, I know what they're doing and I get it. And I caution them that you don't want to jump from having a 3-day fast into a weekend in Vegas, but they do. And then they call me the next week, so it's one of those things where, yes, a lot of people, I think in general, people kind of have a decadent lifestyle, let's say, eating, drinking, that starts to just bog you down and that inflammation rises up. And then clients do come because they want to release, they want to feel better. And so the cleanse will help with that because you're able to pause on layering more on and let your body kind of reset. And so that's really awesome. It's just, what are you going to do after? And also, you're not going to lose a ton of fat in 3 days. In fact, what weight you lose is sodium and water weight. And I'm very upfront with the clients because those who are preparing for a wedding or a bachelorette weekend and they're like, oh, I got to get this in before I go. And I'm like, sure, you'll feel great and it's a wonderful way to bathe your body in nutrients for 3 days, but you don't want to shock the body by going back and forth. That's just not a healthy practice. And it happens. It absolutely happens. But like I said, those are the same clients that then call me the next week and want to figure out how they can get back on a healthy path.
It's interesting because when you were mentioning Vegas, I was thinking that they were, in the first place saying, I drank too much in Vegas. Let me come back and take care of myself. But it's interesting. I didn't think of somebody wanting to do that before they go to Vegas. And then I started thinking, oh, yeah, because I want to look sexy in my bathing suit. Is that kind of
Exactly.
I see. Yeah, I told it. My brain didn't even go there. But that makes sense because, yeah, I think we do lots of things when we want to look sexy. Of course, when we start focusing on that idea of looking a certain way in our bathing suit in a quick way.
Yes, the quick fix.
Yeah, totally. Wow. Yeah, especially because after you do a fast, your body can be a little more tender. It can be a little more vulnerable. It's a little more receptive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's interesting because one of the things I do after people do a fast or a cleanse is I tell them, hey, your immune system might not be super strong for a little time after this. So you probably don't want to go travel. You probably don't want to go do anything kind of risky and crazy like right after you do this because you're also going to be more vulnerable in those positions.
Absolutely. And that is why I think it's, people think they're going to crave a burger and fries when they're done because they're so hungry. And they don't at all. And then so we kind of guide them out with some post-cleanse cool down guidelines about what to eat and what to avoid eating so that they ease back in gently, because your body will tell you right away then if you start to bombard it with the wrong foods or too much food. And so that is also one of the benefits of fasting and cleansing, is that it tunes you into portion control and how much you're putting in. I think a lot of us overeat more than we even know. And so after the fast, you're really able to listen to, am I hungry or am I just bored? If I only eat half of something instead of the whole. So you're able to get back in front of your eating habits and your choices, make better choices, which is, again, one of the benefits of the cleanse. And I also think that just like the whole idea that they're kind of not getting to indulge during the cleanse, it just furthers this idea of a reflective time to reflect on past eating habits and then how you're going to set out on a new, fresh foot when you finish.
So in Sanskrit, the word for fasting is upavasa, which means to stay close to your soul, to be near. Yes. Doesn't that sound so lovely?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, it's very inward. And so I love what you were saying in terms of the founding of your company and how you noticed that the food was being transported from California to New York, ultimately to come back to New York. And there's, so much going on with our food systems in relation to the environment and things like that. And the idea of eating local it's not always easy for people because we ship food around so much. I'd love to hear a little bit about, your philosophy of eating. I know you talked a lot about the whole foods diet. So maybe whatever you'd like to share about your general sort of eating philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not a fan of diets or associating with one type of eating category or habits. Well, I think that there's benefits to those for some people. Really, I'm deeply rooted in this whole food idea. And what that means is, as I'm sure you've heard, is like kind of like shopping the perimeter of the grocery store and thinking about how many hands touched your food or what it took to make that package of food that you're holding in your hand, and reading labels and figuring out truly what is in your food. There shouldn't be more than 4 or 5 ingredients on any food that we're putting into our bodies. If there is, then you have to question, is that really food? Has it been modified in some way, or are there additives in there? I'm not a fan of additives or emulsification techniques to make something look better or taste better. That actually ruins your palate in a big way, and you start to crave those foods that aren't really food. So if you get back to whole foods, what it means is really knowing your farmers or knowing where your food came from. Of course, there's a huge local movement for eating local in the Bay Area, and we're so blessed to have access to the most amazing produce. So things that really truly are grown in the ground. It should be pretty easy to recognize, really. Of course, shopping the farmer's market makes it even more evident. Their food is perishable. It should spoil. It should go bad. So anything that is sitting in your kitchen or in your cupboards and does not age, things that should age, like a loaf of bread that maybe can sit out for 4 weeks, 3, 4 weeks, that's not food, or it's been modified. And so if there's things, preservatives in the food or any sort of adaptations that have been made, you have to imagine what kind of reaction that's going to have in your body, and how is your body going to be able to process that, if at all, because there's repercussions to bad decisions about what we eat and what we put in, and your body will tell you. So really tuning into how you can incorporate more, obviously, plants, fruit and vegetables into your diet, looking at what you're eating now and how you can make some little slight changes. And doesn't mean you have to necessarily purge your entire pantry, but start to read labels and start to see what's in your food. And just because it says it's good for you or it's natural or some of these buzzy words doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you. Even organic, if it's a packaged good that says organic, it doesn't mean it's good for you. So really, really knowing where your food's coming from and how many processes it's gone through, and, knowing that the best hasn't been processed at all.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up that piece about just because something's organic doesn't mean it's healthy. And this is interesting because I think with eating, a lot of our minds want to sort of get one word or one concept or one detail and sort of latch onto it, and they say that this is good because of this or this is bad because of this. And I think that's a classic example of what you just brought up about the organic doesn't always equal good. And the same thing with like gluten-free. I'll hear this a lot. I'll hear somebody say, "Oh, it's gluten-free." And they're saying it in a way where I think they think that I'm then concluding that that means it's good for them. And that's not at all what I'm concluding. I'm just concluding that, okay, sure, it's gluten-free, but what else is in it? Is it salty? Is it sweet? Like you're saying, are there additives? Is it dry? Is it wet? And I think when we forget that there are more details in this one word that we're just focusing on so much, I feel like that really creates a problem for people.
Tons. And that's why it's important to read those labels, because gluten-free has become, really important to some people's health because they do have chronic illness, and that's a real thing. So not to downplay that, but for people who are just trying to avoid gluten and are buying and consuming these imitation foods that are imitating gluten, right there, isn't that kind of like questionable? Okay, so you're not eating bread, but you're eating an imitation food. What is it then? That's the first thing that comes to mind. Well, if you're not eating a gluten-free bread that's made from flour, then what are they replacing it with? And there are some phenomenal food makers that really care and are coming out with really great products. But there's a lot of big business that is also coming in because of the buzziness of it, that are just trying to sell you something that is in a pretty package.
And you would know because you've been in this industry for a long time. And I feel like you know a lot of the ins and outs of it. And, it's such a great thing that you're doing for people. And I know also how busy you are as a mom as well. And actually, you're one of my most creative, and you're like one of my mommy idols.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Well, you were always giving me ideas of cool stuff that I could do with my kid. And you're such a maker.
Yes.
And yeah, you're a big maker. And it also seems like your kids are working on really cool projects. And I really envy that because my kid wants to just keep catching bugs and worms outside all day. I can't get him to make anything.
We need all walks of life, Heather.
I know. No, I love that he wants to catch bugs. So yeah, Teresa, anything else that you wanted to share with the audience today about just the ideas that we were talking about today about fasting, about whole foods diets, about anything that we talked about, any sort of thing that we may have forgotten that you want to talk about?
Absolutely. I think, since this past year has been just a crazy, crazy one for so many people, I know that there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with their eating patterns and habits and may have put on weight. And I'd really, really suggest that whether it is from a company like Can or somebody else, or if you don't have access to a cleanse, someone to guide you on a cleanse, to really, really take it upon yourself to practice a short fast or cleanse of your own. It can be done at home. You can look at our website for inspiration about what you would put into your cleanse and really, really practice that exercise of fasting, because I know you won't be disappointed. I know that there'll be good that comes out of it, and do it on your own terms. Like if it's a full day, that's awesome. If you can go 2 or 3 days, even better. But even if you can only do it overnight and push your eating start time back an hour or two, I think, Heather, you'd probably agree with me that the benefits are over time are really significant. And checking in with yourself and knowing that you can make really big strides in how you feel, and even just your attitude and outlook on life will be enhanced if you can incorporate some form of fasting into your life.
Yeah. And especially because none of the gyms are open.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially helpful and more going at the root cause as well.
Yes. Yes.
For sure. Well, Teresa, I love talking with you. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast finally. And thank you so much for being here today.
You are so welcome, Heather. Thank you so much for having me and letting me share a little bit about Can Cleanse. I really am grateful.
Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.